Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the world changed while everyone was busy watching something else. Not through war, not through a dramatic market crash, not through a single historic announcement, but through thousands of quiet decisions made by countries, businesses, investors, and leaders across the globe. Most people believe major changes happen with a loud bang. History tells a different story. The most important shifts often happen in silence. By the time the headlines arrive, the transformation is already underway. And today there is a transformation happening that few people fully appreciate. The world may be quietly turning toward China. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. These discussions take deep research and careful analysis, and your support helps us continue bringing you long-form insights about the forces shaping our future. Now think about this. If you wanted to understand where the world is heading, would you focus on the news cycle of the week, or would you focus on the long-term movements that unfold over decades? Most people pay attention to the first. The people who understand history focus on the second. When you study the rise and decline of great powers, one pattern appears again and again. Power shifts gradually. Economic influence shifts gradually. Trade shifts gradually. Financial systems shift gradually. And only later do people realize that the center of gravity has moved. For hundreds of years, global influence was concentrated in different parts of the world. Empires rose. Empires expanded. Empires dominated trade. Then they declined. Not because of a single event, but because of a collection of forces building beneath the surface. Today, many of those same forces are visible again. To understand what's happening, we need to step back and look at the bigger picture. Most discussions about China focus on politics. Others focus on trade disputes. Some focus on military competition. But these conversations often miss the most important question. Why are so many countries increasing their economic ties with China, despite the risks and controversies? The answer is surprisingly simple. Countries tend to follow economic opportunity. They don't necessarily choose sides based on ideology. They choose based on incentives. If a nation can improve trade, attract investment, build infrastructure, or expand exports, it will often pursue those opportunities. This is how economic gravity works. Gravity doesn't need permission. It doesn't ask for approval. It simply pulls. And when enough economic activity concentrates in one place, the rest of the world naturally begins moving toward it. Over the past several decades, China has become one of the largest manufacturing centers in human history. Factories that once operated elsewhere gradually shifted. Supply chains expanded. Ports grew. Infrastructure accelerated. Entire industries became interconnected with Chinese production networks. This didn't happen overnight. It happened year after year, decision after decision, investment after investment. The result is that many countries now find themselves economically linked to China's growth, whether they planned it or not, whether they prefer it or not, whether they openly acknowledge it or not. And this creates an important reality. The more connected economies become, the harder it becomes to separate them. Now consider another trend, trade routes. Historically, trade has been one of the strongest indicators of future influence. Where goods flow, money flows. Where money flows, investment follows. Where investment follows, influence often grows. Today, many developing nations view China as a major trading partner. Infrastructure projects stretch across continents. Transportation networks expand. Ports connect regions that were once isolated. New economic corridors emerge. Each project may seem small on its own, but together they create something much larger, a network. And networks are powerful, because once they reach a certain size, they begin reinforcing themselves. The larger they become, the more valuable they become. The more valuable they become, the more participants join. This is how influence expands, not through force alone, but through interconnected interests. Now let's talk about something even more important, money. Throughout history, dominant powers have often enjoyed a unique advantage. Their currency becomes central to global trade. Their financial system becomes the foundation for international transactions. Their debt becomes widely accepted. Their markets attract global capital. But history also teaches that no financial system remains dominant forever. Every reserve currency has experienced a rise. Every reserve currency has eventually faced challenges. That doesn't mean collapse is imminent. It means competition emerges. And today, many countries are exploring alternatives. Some are settling trade in local currencies. Others are building payment systems outside traditional frameworks. Still others are creating financial relationships that reduce dependence on existing structures. These developments remain relatively small compared to the established system, but trends matter, especially when they persist for years, because major transitions rarely begin at full speed. They begin quietly, one agreement, one transaction, one partnership at a time. This brings us to a critical lesson from history. Most people expect change to be obvious. History suggests the opposite. When a new power rises, many people dismiss it. They point to weaknesses. They focus on short-term problems. They assume the future will resemble the past. This happens repeatedly. The established order feels permanent until it isn't. The same psychology appears in markets. People extrapolate recent experience indefinitely. If something has worked for decades, they assume it will work forever. But cycles don't work that way. Every cycle contains the seeds of its own transformation. Success creates confidence. Confidence creates expansion. Expansion creates excess. Excess creates vulnerabilities. Then new competitors emerge. This pattern has appeared throughout history, and while every era is different, human nature remains remarkably consistent. Now, none of this means one country automatically replaces another. History is rarely that simple. The future is not predetermined. Many outcomes remain possible. What matters is recognizing the forces at work. Ignoring change doesn't stop change. Understanding change creates options. This is where many investors make mistakes. They focus on predicting headlines instead of understanding systems. The most successful long-term thinkers study cause and effect relationships. They ask, where is capital moving? Where is productivity increasing? Where are infrastructure investments expanding? Where are new relationships being formed? These questions often reveal more than the daily news cycle. And today, many of those answers point toward Asia, not because the outcome is guaranteed, but because the trend is significant. Another important factor is demographics. Large populations create large markets. Large markets attract businesses. Businesses attract investment. Investment accelerates development. Development creates opportunity. When this cycle gains momentum, it can continue for decades. This is one reason global corporations pay such close attention to Asian growth. They aren't making emotional decisions. They're responding to economic realities, and economic realities often shape geopolitical realities. Now let's discuss what this means for ordinary people, because ultimately, that's what matters. Many viewers hear conversations about global power shifts and assume they have little relevance to daily life. In reality, they influence almost everything: jobs, investments, savings, business opportunities, currency values, economic growth. The world you live in is shaped by forces that operate far beyond national borders. Understanding those forces gives you an advantage, not because you can predict the future perfectly, but because you can prepare for multiple possibilities. The goal is never certainty. The goal is resilience. Throughout history, people who adapted to changing environments generally performed better than those who assumed nothing would change. Adaptability has always been one of humanity's greatest strengths, and it remains one of the most valuable skills today. As we look ahead, one thing seems increasingly clear. The world is entering a period of transition. Transitions create uncertainty, but they also create opportunity. The challenge is recognizing them early enough to act intelligently. Most people wait until a trend becomes obvious. By then, much of the opportunity has already passed. The individuals who pay attention to long-term shifts often position themselves differently. They focus less on noise, more on structure, less on emotion, more on reality, less on predictions, more on probabilities. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all. The question isn't whether the world will change. The question is whether we will recognize the change while it is still happening. Because history suggests something remarkable. The biggest shifts are rarely announced. They are lived, and by the time everyone sees them, they are no longer new. They are simply the world as it has become. If you found this analysis valuable, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who enjoys thinking beyond the headlines. Thank you for watching. And remember, the future belongs not to those who predict it perfectly, but to those who understand the forces that shape it.